begin by saying thank you to Representative Lopez. She is an extraordinary voice down at the Capitol. And when she speaks, people listen, not only because of her fluency on the issues, but because of the passion with which she represents her community. So please join me in thanking Brenda Lopez for being here. So I practiced in Spanish, and I'm not going to use any of it because I don't want to embarrass myself. But I do want to say thank you. Gracias. I want to say thank you for having me. This is not my first visit to this part of Gwinnett. In fact, I spent a lot of time in Gwinnett last cycle. We ran a couple of races up here you may have heard about. We were able to get Sam Park elected. We were able to get really close on Donald Cloud. We, of course, got to keep Brenda Lopez and Pedro Marin. And I've spent my time in the legislature trying to increase the diversity of our caucus, because diversity has to go beyond the normative conversations of black and white. And I'll tell you why I think about it that way. I grew up in Mississippi. We're not exactly known for our multicultural nation. We have a different reputation. But I grew up the daughter of a college librarian and a shipyard worker. My parents both come from extraordinary poverty. My dad likes to say he's from the wrong side of the tracks, but my mom's from the wrong side of the tracks. My mom is the only one of her 7 siblings to finish high school. She not only finished high school, she graduated as valedictorian, went on to college. My dad is the only man in his family to finish high school and go to college. My father is dyslexic, but he grew up in Mississippi in the 1950s, dyslexic, which meant that no one really understood what was wrong, and he was a young black man who couldn't read, so they just told him he was stupid. But his sisters realized that he had this amazing oral memory, and that if you read things to him, he could understand it, he could learn. And so they helped him memorize his way through school. When he was about 15 or 16, he and my mom met in high school. He says he was wooing her, courting her. The way mom describes it sounded a little more like stalking. We just don't call it. But my parents have been together and have now been married for 48 years. My parents moved to Wisconsin so my mom could go to grad school, and they moved back to Mississippi. My mom came back armed with a master's degree in library science. My dad had a college degree in history. My mom worked at a college library where she could have made less money than the janitor, because there were no protections for her. And my dad, because he wasn't terribly literate, the best job he could get was a noble job, and my dad got a job as a shipyard worker. He worked for the next 15 years with his hands, really not being called upon to use his mind. And what my family proved is that you can do everything you're supposed to. You can finish high school, you can go to college, you can get a good degree, and you can still struggle. My parents decided to complicate the situation by having 6 children, but the reality was they did everything they were supposed to, and we still were working class or working poor, depending on the day. My mom didn't like either of those terms, so they called us the genteel poor. We had no money, but we watched PBS and we read books. But what my parents wanted us to understand was that no matter what our circumstances were, they did not dictate our future. That we were going to be whatever we wanted to be. And so my mom and dad had 3 rules. We had to go to church, we had to go to school, and we had to take care of each other. We had to go to church because they wanted us to believe in something larger than ourselves. They wanted us to anchor our souls, but understand that faith is something that lifts you beyond what can sometimes seem like a terrible day. When you're worried about what you're going to eat for dinner, or if you're going to have dinner, having something that anchors you helps you survive. My parents also believed in education, because even though it didn't transform their lives as much as they thought it would, it had gotten them further than anyone in their families had gotten before. And so they made sure all of their children went to college, finished high school, and went to college. My parents told us they can take your job, they can take your house, they can take your car, they cannot take what's in your mind. And so we grew up believing that education was essential. And my parents believed that we should take care of each other. Not only taking care of the 6 of us, but what they meant was you have to take care of the people around you. You have to take care of your community. My mom put it, no matter how little we had, there was always someone with less, and your job was to find and serve that person. So we might not have running water in the house, but my mom and dad would take us to go volunteer at a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter. We may not know where our next meal was coming from. They would take us to a juvenile justice facility. We would go teach in housing projects. We would volunteer in nursing homes, because my parents wanted us to understand we couldn't wallow in our circumstances. We had to work to lift everybody. And that's the ethic that I brought to everything that I do. My parents, of course, were not happy being poor, so they decided to go for permanent poverty, and they became United Methodist ministers. So that's what moved us from Mississippi to Georgia. When I was 15, Mom and Dad both were admitted to Emory University. They moved us to Georgia. We lived in Decatur, and they went to the Candler School of Theology, where they both received Masters of Divinity. They moved back to Mississippi, but I stayed here in Georgia. I graduated from Avenel High School, went to college at Spelman, went to the University of Texas at Austin for a master's degree, went to Yale for law school where I studied tax policy, and then I had to get a real job. So I came back to Atlanta and became a tax attorney. And then started what has been referred to as my trajectory of downward economic mobility. So I went from tax attorney, then I became deputy city attorney for the city of Atlanta, and then I decided, hey, I was making way too much money, so I joined the legislature and made $17,310 a year. And during that tenure, I decided to start my own company, in part because I like living inside my house and needed to make a living. And that's how I came to the business community and learned how to start and finance a really strong business. But the reason I'm running for governor happened when I was still in Mississippi. My mom and dad, as I said, we lived in Gulfport. My dad worked actually at Ingalls Shipbuilding, which is about 40 miles away. And when, in the morning, because we only had one car, my dad would get a ride to work with Mr. Luther, who picked up all the men in the community. It would take them all the 40 miles to Pascagoula. When Dad had to work multiple shifts, when he couldn't come home at the end of the day, my father would have to hitchhike his way back if he couldn't find a ride. And sometimes it was 2 or 3 in the morning. And in my family, as I said, we were pretty poor. So we each had one coat. And one winter, it was cold and it was rainy outside, and Dad had to come back, and he was hitchhiking, and he called Mom, and she said, well, I'm going to come get you, Robert. So you start making your way down the highway, and we'll come and find you. So she put all of us in the car, and we got on the highway. My older sister took one window, and I'm number 2, so I took the second window, and we looked out on the highway for my dad. And Andrea saw him on the side of the road, and Mom pulled over, and he got in the car. But he was wet, he was shivering, he turned up the heat. My mom looked at him because he was in his shirt sleeves. She's like, Robert, where's your coat? And my dad said, there was a homeless man on the beach. I gave it to him. And I looked at Andrea, and she looked at me because we were ready for my mom to yell. And she's like, oh, okay. And so I looked at Andrea, and she looked at me, and we're like, wait, we get yelled after losing a sock. Daddy gave away his only coat, and this
Right.
is okay. And because she was the oldest, she had to take the risk. And I said, you ask. She's like, Daddy, why would you give this man your coat? And my father said, because that man was alone on that beach. And when I left him, he would still be alone. But I knew you were coming for me. I'm running for governor of Georgia because I'm coming for Georgia. I am coming for the families that have been left out and left behind, for the ones whose language or whose skin color, whose GPA or zip code are not the right ones according to some folks. I'm coming for the families that do everything they're supposed to and still struggle to get by. For the folks that have been left out and left behind by the progress we see all around us. As Representative Lopez pointed out, we've got families that do everything they're supposed to but can't get to work because they don't have access to public transit, because not everybody can afford a car. We have communities that are left behind because we don't think that their schools are valuable because we don't value the children inside. And so I'm running for governor because we need a governor who believes in the value of every Georgian, not just the privileged, but everyone. And there are 3 things we have to do. First, we have to educate bold and ambitious children. We have to believe in them from cradle to career. My parents understood the value of education, not because they had parents who did so, but because they understood how it moved them forward. But we can also look at my cousins who didn't get as far as we did. I know that you have to believe in the value of every child because my parents believed in us. But I also know that that means you cannot wait until they're in kindergarten. You have to start with high quality daycare, early learning, because from 0 to 3, minds are being shaped, brains are forming, cognitive development is happening. And those children are not taken care of and learning then, they are behind from the moment they get to school. We have to also talk about early pre-K opportunities. Pre-K for 3-year-olds if it makes sense, and making certain that every pre-K slot is filled in Georgia for 4-year-olds. And that's one of the reasons I was proud of my work in 2011 to not only protect the Hope Scholarship, but to save pre-K for Georgia. But once you get to K through 12, we have a system that makes no sense. Because if you go to the right school, you get the right education. If you go to the wrong school, God help you. My parents made sure we lived on the poor street, on the middle class side of town, so we get dumped into the good school. you should not have to have a degree in cartography to figure out how to educate your child. And you shouldn't have to be an advocate for your child, because that's what government is for. That's what schools are for. Public education is about making certain every child gets an education, no matter where they live. And as governor, I will make certain that the same curriculum, the same opportunities are in every single school in every single district. Because we, not only can we afford to, we cannot afford not to. We have to guarantee high quality education that's not just adequate, but excellent. And we have to believe that technical college should be free. Georgia did it once, we can do it again. And we have to believe in high quality, affordable higher education. Because the reality is, even with the Hope Scholarship today, you have to have a B to get the scholarship. But you shouldn't have to have a B to be successful in Georgia. Which means we have to explore and offer need-based aid, what I call Hope 2. Because everyone should have a right to an affordable higher education. But once you've educated bold and ambitious children, it doesn't matter if you haven't built a thriving and diverse economy where families don't have to struggle to make ends meet. And that means investing in small businesses. Because today when we talk about economic development, what we mean is we're going to steal a company from Indiana, bring it down here, pay the workers less, and hope it works out until they get stolen away by another county or another state 10 years from now. That's not economic development, that's theft. I started a small business called Now Account, and what we do is move capital to small businesses. We help small businesses who've been gouged by lenders or just told you don't qualify for credit get access to the money they need. That's the job the state should be involved in as well. Because we need to invest in Pam Inc. or Joe Inc. or Jose Inc. the same way we invest in Coca-Cola Inc. Because small businesses are the backbone of Georgia. They are more than 90% of the jobs we have, but we do not put our money where our mouths are. But if we will invest in every county and every community, we can grow better jobs. One of my plans is the Advanced Energy Jobs Plan, because Georgia can create jobs tomorrow, 45,000 new jobs, by investing in high quality, high energy. We can do hydro, biomass, solar, and wind across the state of Georgia in every county and at every skill level. So you can be high tech, you can be sales, you can be construction, you can be manufacturing, and you can get a job if Georgia makes itself the high energy, advanced energy capital of the South. But once you've created and educated bold and ambitious children, once you've done the work to build a thriving and diverse economy, it is irrelevant if we do not have an engaged and responsive government. I've spent my time at the Capitol 11 years, 7 as minority leader. And in that time, I have fought year after year to protect Georgians from their leaders. I've had to stop terrible bills. I've had to defend us against horrible, draconian legislation that does not value who we are. But as the next governor of Georgia, I will make it my mission to make certain that our government responds to our needs, all of our needs, everywhere, by defending voting rights, as I have done for the last 11 years, including by creating a nonprofit organization that's registered more than 200,000 people of color in the last 2 years, and fighting Brian Kemp every single time he tries to strip the right to vote away from families. I will expand criminal justice reform, because the reality is Georgia had the 4th highest incarceration rate in the nation. We're too quick to put you in, and we're too slow to help you out. Georgia has to fix that, and we have to do it immediately, and I know how we can do it. Because I have a brother who is currently serving time in Mississippi. I told you all of us went to college. My brother Walter dropped out of Morehouse College between his junior and senior years, because my brother's a drug addict. Walter had an undiagnosed mental illness. He's bipolar, and we didn't know it for 20 years, because we didn't have health insurance when Walter started presenting. My parents didn't know what was wrong, the school didn't know what was wrong. They just assumed he was a black kid, so he must be bad. And this happens too often, especially in communities of color. So Walter started self-medicating, and he graduated to crack and then heroin. And when Walter started committing crimes, he got caught. And he served a year, and he got out with a suspended sentence. And that was fantastic, except Walter couldn't get a job because he's an ex-offender. Walter couldn't find housing because no one would rent to someone with his record. So we got together, his siblings, and we found him a place to live, but unfortunately the best place we could find had the wrong people for him to be around. It took less than 6 months for him to reoffend, have his probation revoked, and have him go back to prison. Georgia has too many families that have sons and daughters that have Walters all around this state. And we have to believe in their redemption the same we believe in everyone else. And I will be the governor who understands that whether you're Walter or one of my other siblings, you deserve the right to succeed in Georgia. I will fight for transit because I know that the way we get around helps us get to opportunity. I will fight every day to expand Medicaid because it makes no sense that in the state of Georgia, 500,000 people do not have health care. Because not only will Medicaid expansion create opportunities, it will create 56,000 new jobs in Georgia. And it will help people who have diabetes and high blood pressure get the medicine they need before it turns into a crisis and then to a catastrophe. And I could go on for a lot because I know a lot about what we need in Georgia. And I've spent my life learning how to serve. But I want to tell you one more story before I close. I talked about MARTA because I believe in transit. Transit helped my family. When we moved from Mississippi to Atlanta so mom and dad could go to grad school, my parents' car died a few months before we left, and they had to buy a used car. That car lasted, it got us across Alabama, got us to Decatur, and it died a couple of weeks later. So we were on MARTA from then on. That's how my mom and dad got to Emory University, it's how I got around, it's how my siblings got around. I even went to college on MARTA. Walked down from the Lee Street station all the way to Spelman. With my sister, she carried one suitcase and I carried the other. But when I was 17, I graduated from Avondale High School. I was the valedictorian. And in the state of Georgia, if you're the valedictorian, you get invited to meet the governor. It's an amazing opportunity. So I remember dressing up, putting on high heels, which I hate because I'm very clumsy, getting on the bus and going with my mom and dad to West Paces Ferry. And we got off that bus and we walked up that driveway to those big black gates, and there was a guard standing there. And he looked at us and he said, "This is a private event. You don't belong here." My dad said, no, this is my daughter Stacey. She's valedictorian. This is an event for valedictorians. We're supposed to be here. And the guard said, no, I just saw you all get off of that bus. This is not for you. Now, he'd never met Robert and Carolyn Abrams, so soon he opened the gates and we got inside. But the problem is I don't remember meeting Governor Zell Miller. I don't remember meeting my fellow valedictorians. All I remember is a man standing at a gate telling me I don't belong. That in the state of Georgia, I couldn't possibly belong inside that space. I want to be the governor that opens the gates of opportunity wide for every Georgian, so that no one ever thinks they don't belong, and no one ever questions that this is their state. It's a state of opportunity, a state of incredible opportunity, where we will all not only survive, we will succeed. And I want your help to get me there. Thank you so much.